Today we're discussing mental health, and one of the things about mental health is that it's a big question. It's on the rise in this country and we and in the world, and we want to know how the church is responding to it, how the church should be responding to it, and how we look at people with mental health issues and look at them and respond as people and respond to them in love, but also balance what we know about the day-to-day life and how to make sure these people are on the best path forward, but not be treated like lower class citizens. So moving forward in that, we just wanted to discuss that, and we wanted to bring up the question. The first question is the church responding any better to mental health than the average population? And if not, what can be done? And so opening up, I think I'd like to ask that question to you, Lasky. What's your thoughts on that?
Is the church responding any better to mental health than the average population? My personal experience at church has been no. That it hasn't been better. But that is specifically in times when I'm experiencing mental health issues. I have bipolar disorder, so I have manic episodes where I feel like I'm the belle of the ball and I'm excited and everyone enjoys my conversation and it's sterling and it's this. When I'm depressed, when I'm anxious, I feel like the negative energy, the air just gets sucked out of the room, and I'm with people and they tend to feed off of that negative energy that I'm feeling inside, and it eschews me. It makes me feel like I'm outside. But is the church any less loving? That's the whole question. It's like this perception of reality. Like, am I in my own bubble, and are they seeing me the way that I see myself? Like, I believe people with mental illness, especially bipolar disorder, and I can speak from personal experience, is that we're very sensitive. We pick up on little cues, we pick up on eye movements, on looking away, furtive glances, like, does this person make me a second class citizen? And I think when it comes down to it, we as people don't like being around others that make us either question ourselves or feel bad. We don't like to feel bad. But I will say that generally, compared to the population as a whole, I've been treated with more love in general at church than I am when I'm going through the drive-through at Carl's Jr. or just going through the day-to-day life. I mean, there will be more questions fielded my way than just ordinary life. So it's both a yes and a no. Is the church responding any better? I don't think there's like a coordinated effort to try and make everyone with mental illness feel better, but in general, it's a place where I feel better more days than not.
Do you feel understood? And how important is that?
Do I feel understood? Sometimes on the basis of, am I willing to be open? Am I understood? I'd probably have to say no most of the time, because I feel generally it feels like a lot of people, in my mind, I think to myself, people haven't gone through the wide variety of ups and downs that I've gone to. Everyone has ups and downs, that's very normal, but have you yelled at 3 o'clock in a Denny's at the top of your lungs because you feel like demons are resting on the shoulders of the waiter talking to my dad? Like, have you ever had that experience? The answer is probably no. Have you ever thought you were the Antichrist? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? These are questions that, in my thought process and from talking to people, that's not on their radar. So when I bring these things up with people and I try and tell my story for some manner of support, generally it feels like there's like the desire to be comforted. There's the desire for compassion to be shown to me, but that's about it, and it doesn't go any further. Like the question doesn't get asked specifically about maybe what drove that or what am I feeling now, and I think generally that might have to do with the depression component, just kind of maybe turning people off to you.
So I actually have a question there. When asking, has the response done any better than the average population?
Mm-hmm.
You said no.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious. In your
So
so.
Mm-hmm.
But they've done better in your general walk, in your general day-to-day life, but not in your times of trouble with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask you personally, has anyone in your times of trouble, has anyone walked with you well, and what did that look like?
Mm.
In your when you're high and everyone's high and everyone's around you and everyone's enjoying you.
Mm-hmm.
It can be the people at Denny's that are enjoying you, and it can be the people at church.
Right.
And church is probably generally it's your friends, and it's also a community of people that are believers.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to know what if you can pull any examples from people that have done a good walk through you during your troubled times, and how we can replicate that in the church.
For sure. The first thought came up, and I won't say his name.
Mm-hmm.
We'll call him Jay. He one day, this was about 4 months after a suicide attempt.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to the message in church, and I was about to leave. I was about to duck out because I felt like no one's going to understand, and I was still very much in the regret and the shame. And I decided to re-enter the church to find somebody to talk with because I was in such a bad state. And this individual was there, and I started to cry uncontrollably. Like, I should feel so welcome in this church. I should feel that I shouldn't have to escape. There should be no reason why I feel like I should have to escape. And I just started crying because he looked at me with compassion, and it's not even so I just started crying, and he was a shoulder there for me, and just said, Lasky, what's going on? What's going on, bro? What's going on? And yeah, and I mean, there was that, and then at that same time, there was an elderly man who just took me into his bosom, and as I cried, he said, if you want to share this while you're crying, you can. Otherwise, just know that I'm here for you. And that was a very poignant moment of the church coming around me. Yeah.
I think a second question that you asked there is, what does it look like when you don't feel loved, right? Or when you don't feel, right? Is that...
I was asking more what does it look like when someone's interacting with people with mental health correctly,
right?
And so I would want to see what that looks like. And Lasky, from what you're talking about, it just does seem that it would be someone, and this is what the church should be doing, taking a time to look at each individual person that walks in those doors and saying, how are you doing? Genuinely. Not, hey, good morning, how are you doing? And next person, but genuinely.
Yeah, and I think there's a component of that too, where because I know for me, when I've battled with mental issues, there's the place you expect to find love, right, can set you up for the place that reinforces the mental loop that you're in.
Mm.
So like if I'm thinking that, okay, I'm going to church, right? If there's one place that somebody should understand me,
Mm.
if there's one place that somebody should see me, if there's one place that somebody should put their time on park and just be present, right? It's here. And so I drum up the anticipation that I'm gonna get deep with somebody, right? And then you can get, you get there and it just, like I said, slip out, and
Mhm.
it can get so disappointing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That it kind of reinforces whatever it is that you're dealing with, right? I don't know if you've dealt with that.
No, sure. Yeah, it kind of feels like maybe there's a delusion in church that we have to be buttoned up, and there's like this self-perpetuating thing where people where it's easier to just be everything just be courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's just courtesy, and on the margin of what's acceptable to them to give, and it's like, how little can I give to be seen as loving,
Mm-hmm.
but not really asking the questions that might break down and get to the core issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happens. I mean, I'd say that's 90% of my church experience is, shaking hands, and it's nice when people look at you and say, yeah, you're a good person, how are you doing or whatever, but to delve into the meaty issues doesn't necessarily happen in a big church setting.
And I think that's kind of why I was asking that question about, do you feel understood, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of liken it to the age war of, does a man understand a woman? Does a woman understand a man, right? And at the heart of that issue, which is similar to this, is for you to love somebody, right? You have to understand them, right? You have to understand, one, how that person wants to be loved, and how that person wants to love you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in order to set yourself up to be able to effectively receive their love, right, and be able to love them, right? And I think when it comes to mental health issues, kind of what you kind of brought up earlier, the avenue and the atmosphere for that understanding to happen, which sets up the loving, right? Sometimes it never even gets started, because when you see eyes and you see expressions and you hear words that make you feel uncomfortable, it's hard to want to open up to then engage in that love, swimming in love together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm seeing kind of a core problem here. So comparing the American population to the church, I look at what you have to do as an American in engaging with other people. There's only one thing: don't physically hurt them. That's all you have to do as an American. That's a have to. You can hate them, you can talk crap about them, you can do whatever you want, but you don't have. You just can't not hit them. But
Hit.
what's hurt?
Hurt.
You can say anything you want about them, and you can do anything legally. But what should you do as an American? You should be polite. You don't have to agree with them, but you should be polite and you should be genuine. Now, the church, on the other hand, has some haves and some shoulds as well. And I think it does have to be a real church, is to be caring.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a difficult concept, and it means different things for everything. So we've substituted caring for being nice.
Mm-hmm.
And nice and caring are not the same things. Sometimes someone to be caring to you does need to, look you in the eye and be that shoulder to cry on, not say anything. But niceness just says, ask him how you're doing. But caring can also mean someone needs to look at me and say, what the heck are you doing, Taylor? And that's caring, and it's complicated, and it requires discernment, and it requires really looking at the character of Jesus and the characteristics of God and trying to apply them into the daily situation. And that means basically doing love math on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis.
Yes.
And that's not easy, so we just substitute for nice.
Right. I love that. I love everything about that. And I think, at the heart of, and in a sense, to even kind of drive that home even more, is this loop that we're talking about, right? The loop that, you get to. Actually, you hurt more when your love is shallow. Does that make sense? So when you go to a place and somebody is like, hey, how you doing? And leave it there, right? What that says to someone dealing with mental issues, depending on what the question is or the lie that they believed, is, oh, I'm not worth spending the time with. If I was interesting, if I was, pretty, if I was whatever, this person would have the interest to sit and spend time with me, but they don't. Does that make sense? And then you go home and you take all the people you met, all of the ones that didn't go deep, and you multiply that by, and say, this is data that this lie I believe about myself must be true. Does that make sense? And so in kind of bringing up the issue of what can we do different, it's this meaningful connections. I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I thought of a good metaphor when you were speaking. It's people with mental health issues or mental health disorders. Sometimes it's a lonely condition where there's a lot of time spent in downtime and thinking about yourself, maybe because you don't have... you struggle with finding relationships, you struggle with finding work. So a lot of times you have downtime, so you're swimming in your head and you're swimming in the deep end. Especially when you're by yourself, you don't have reinforcements, you don't have barriers and boundaries to bounce your ideas off of and get good feedback. And so you're swimming in the deep end. And so all day, and then you come to church, and each person there is a pool. Like you expect each person to be a sort of pool where you can jump into a conversation and tread on water or go deep with someone. And people in church, you're expecting them to be deep pools because reflected on the weighty issues of life and the important stuff. And someone says, "How are you?" And it seems like, oh, they're deep. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be able to jump in and talk with something. And I'm like, I'm okay. And they're like, oh, fine. And then they go on to the next person. Instead of jumping into the deep end with somebody, I just dove straight into a 2-foot shallow pool, and I broke my head. Yeah. I broke every bone in my body because they weren't there. They weren't at that same level. And I mean, to be honest though, I feel like I can't, on my end, it's wise to not expect that everyone can be 12 feet deep. Mm-hmm. But the thing with people is you'd hope that they'd at least be able to that floor to be movable. Mm-hmm. And if they're starting at a 2-foot pool and they're just asking you how are you, to be flippant, or not flippant but cordial, and then I need to dive deep, I'm not, then that floor should be able to depress a little bit.
Right. How do you so there's two as far as the church responding and embracing mental health. So there's one you're talking about where it's people that don't know you, mm-hmm. potentially, mm-hmm. right, and choose not to go deep. I think that's kind of is there a way we can reinforce that? Maybe, but it's one that it's like you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a second part, which is somebody that does know you, right? And if we want to park there for a second, I think one of the issues that I've seen there is where it's like you're known, and then, you know, kind of like you mentioned earlier, when you show up, the energy changes. And they're trying really hard to make you feel normal, right? And in their attempt to make you feel normal, even though everybody knows that you're different, right? There's that self whatever of there's this elephant in the room that then raises the internal temperature and then raises the mental negative energy that then continues to push and drive the loop, right? So, you know, can you talk a little bit about what's it like? What's a positive reaction to that? Somebody that knows that, yeah, you maybe last time they heard from you, you were struggling with depression or had some thoughts. What does it look like to correctly be loved by somebody, right? Like that knows you, right? And is really trying to care, but maybe they're not there's a misalignment in their understanding of the love language, right? So, you know, maybe you're a quality time person, right? And they're showering shallow words of affirmation, right? You know, can you talk a little bit about, you know, what that looks like?
Like a positive, like if I'm coming in with depression and I'm heading for the young adults group that's populating, like how would I like to be responded to?
Right.
Oh man, I've just never really had a situation where I was depressed enough, when I was depressed and walked into a situation where I feel I didn't stink up the room and I was actually responded to positively, because my reality testing sometimes isn't very good. But if I'm in a decent enough place and I'm just a little depressed or a little sad, I'd at least like someone to turn to me. Just to turn and say, hey man, how are you? And to feel the negative energy. Like, I kind of feel like we all have a sixth sense and an aura about us, or some electronic force field that we're very perceptive species, and when someone feels that there's that negative energy, instead of playing into that tried and true pattern of, you know, asking like simple questions and just turning to the person and saying, no, how are you? Yeah. And one thing that I know from research on suicide is that asking, if someone's really bad, and they're crying like I was at church, like that's not normal behavior. That's someone's being erratic, and they might, you know, really be in a spot where they're in a crisis. Telling somebody or asking somebody, are you feeling suicidal right now? That will never make someone who's not suicidal. If someone's not suicidal, they're not going to end their life, because they're still feeling purpose. They still feel like they have a life. But if someone actually is suicidal and you ask that question, you give them an outlet to offload what's going on, and you might save their life by asking that question.
Yeah, so I think, you know, one thing you're hitting in there is, it's almost like at the heart of what you're looking for, and not you, me, and anyone that's dealt with or dealing with it. It's almost like you're begging for somebody to give you an outlet. Is that fair, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
And you know, that outlet comes in many different ways. Sometimes it's just, you know, like you said, putting a finger on the issue and not being afraid to go there and say, I care about you enough to not worry about, you know, making it sound weird or getting awkward, and let's go in. Is that where you're at, right?
Well, I guess one thing that I'm thinking about is what can we give to people to better interact with this? What can we, as this small tiny group of 3 people, what can we as a larger church, singular church, multiple churches, the church body, as the country, what can we give, and what's feasible? I think that someone saying, "How are you doing?" to someone that they care about and genuinely asking is feasible. Having everyone say, "How are you doing?" to everyone that they see is not feasible and genuinely so. I think one easy a prognosis, or one easy thing that people can do is basically say, "There's probably 30 people at church that you're going to say hi to. Always say hi to them. Always give them direct eye contact. Always give them your best. But you're running around. You know how the end of church goes. But take the time out with the 2-3 people that you really care about and really just say, genuinely, how are you doing? How's everything? How was your week? How's that going? And if you know someone's has had struggles, don't be afraid to say, "Hey, have you had some bad thoughts this week?" I think one of the tough things is that if someone says that to me, and this is, granted, if someone comes up to Lapa, you come up to me and say, "Hey, have you had some bad thoughts? Are you thinking of suicide?" I say, "What the heck, man? Like, no. Like, what do I look like it? Like," and so, and that's not the end of the world. Like, one bad interaction is not going to end our friendship, but it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think that, and you might offend me, but I think that's an okay thing. But don't just do it willy nilly. You have to kind of be, because if you're the guy that walks around church and asks everyone how have you had any struggles with suicide, you're gonna get more no's than yeses, and most people are gonna say that guy's a weirdo.
Right.
But being able to be intentional with people that you see are struggling, be able to do that, I think is a very fair thing. But I would say this. So Friday night, I met one of my fiance's friends, and I asked her, "Hey, where's her kid tonight?" Because I knew she had a kid, and I knew she didn't have the kid tonight, so it was just kind of a conversation. "Where's your kid? Where's your husband?" Like, I know they're off, and she goes into like a deep discussion about how her kid's with his real dad, his biological dad, not her husband, and that it was such a struggle leaving him when she left him X amount of years ago, and all this stuff. And boy, did it feel really uncomfortable and really hot, like the first few seconds of that. Like, I was just asking where he is tonight. Like, I don't need to know why you left him and why he was a bad husband or a bad father. I don't need to know any of that. But at the same token, after that conversation, after that uncomfortability, I did feel like I knew her better. Like, and so because I had to I didn't want to live in that uncomfortability, but I had to, I felt like we were closer. And I didn't feel like, she's just one of my fiance's friends that I'm never gonna like really get to know, or I'll get to know her in a year the next time I see her or whatever. No, it was like, oh wow, like I genuinely know something about her. And by the way, a lot of this information I actually knew the facts of. Like I've been with my fiance for a while. She tells me one of her best friends stories of one of her best friends, but to hear the actual emotions and dive deep, it was uncomfortable. But it was I got closer with her. So I'd just say to the public, one thing that they could take away is don't be afraid to live in that uncomfortability for a little bit. It might be rewarding at the end of it. Like, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but there are rewards to that uncomfortability. And for people that have those mental health issues, I know that this is tough, but sometimes don't be afraid to be raw, like in an awkward position. Yeah, sure, some people might run away from those uncomfortabilities. Like, I wanted to some degree, like, but at the end it was rewarding. And some people would run away, and some people want to run away. Don't 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 conflate the two. There are people that will leave that conversation. Let them leave. They're not for you. There are people that want to leave that conversation, but will sit there with you, and it's okay. That's okay to want to be out of that uncomfortability, but to sit through it anyways. Be that suffering servant, and together, suffering together, you guys can move forward in a way.
Because when it says in the Bible, like, comfort those who need to be comforted and mourn with those who mourn, like, you're not mourning the fact that I'm feeling bad, or you're not, but you're mourning with me. You know, you don't necessarily have to be going through the exact same thing I have to be going through to extend that care, that genuine, you know.
It's like when you were talking about, you know, that negative energy, right? It's people embracing it and say, dude, I don't like this energy, right? But I'm sensing it, and instead of me, the example that comes to mind, is like, you know, have you ever been in the same room or in the same place next to someone that farted? Right? And both of you know that it stinks. You know, it gets a lot more awkward, right? When you're trying to act like nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, dude, I know what I just did. I just dropped the bomb. Right? And in a way, it's kind of like that, you know, like you know, when you're struggling with mental stuff, mentally, you know, you're not present. You know, you stink. Right? You know, whether it's your attitude, whether it's you barely had time to groom yourself, or, you know, because you know coming in, right, you stink. It doesn't always mean you stink physically. It may just, you know, and so when people try to act like you don't, right, it's almost like, you know, right, versus, hey, you know, just tell me I stink. I already know I stink, right? And let's put that behind us and move forward, right? And inhale this thing together.
Because where you can't pull a fart back in, you can pull emotions back in.
Right.
You can pour it out and then bring it back in.
So, okay.
Yeah, so kind of then, after what we've discussed, I would ask both of you, and I'll ask myself first, is the church responding any better to mental health than the average population? And if not, what can be done? And I think that, you know, the church is probably has some of the better people to do this, but as a whole, it is not. It is maybe 1 or 2% better than the rest of the population, and I think it comes down to not understanding too. I think the understanding something we didn't cover at all, but like how to even get to a point of what is mental health. We didn't define it. We don't know what it is. We're just looking how to sit with someone that has mental health issues. But if not, what can be done? I think it's on the part of the people within the church with mental health, don't be afraid to be raw. And on the part of the people that do not suffer with mental health, don't be afraid to sit in the uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. I think one thing I'll kind of add to that too, and I'd just like to speak to people that are struggling mentally. You're both normal and different, you know. So what I mean by that, the things that we struggle with mentally are things that every single person is struggling with. The only difference is sometimes we have much higher spikes and much lower valleys, than the typical person. And that's why we're also different. So in the makeup of our body is, we're normal, we're humans, we're people, right? But God's made us differently. And so I like to just tell you, embrace the fact that the depth of your low is a direct symbol or a direct opposite to the height of your highs. And so it's because you are capable of so much, right, that you get to sink to so low. And so, another way of kind of putting it, if you watch basketball, if you see an athlete, the athlete that has the ability to jump really high and dunk the ball, right, is also the one that's going to have the potential to fall to such lows because they get to heights that most people don't get to. And so don't see yourself and define yourself by how low you get, because then you're doing yourself a disservice of, God's made you in a unique way. God's made you very powerful. And we just need to find that atmosphere, find that place, find that culture that will continue to reinforce the strength, and that loop that will drive you to do things that it will center you to what God has made you to do. So I just wanted to drop that in. I don't know if you have a few thoughts on that to wrap up.
Yeah, it's very much like the machine is capable of doing something, but there's a little part that's off. That there's a what's that phrase? Something in the chain or cog. One of the cogs is out, so it's not running fully smooth. Smooth. It's not running smoothly. So yeah, just what you said, that love that you can express to somebody and that compassion can enable the best to come out of that person. So people with mental illness often think that they're a burden, or they feel that way and they feel like people see them that way because they're different. But if you can enable someone and encourage someone that yes, you're different is good, and it can make a difference. Yeah. It can make the world a better place with your unique way of seeing the world, which is going to be different than somebody else's, which goes for humankind across the board. Just enabling and supporting that is a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for sitting in with that. Next week we'll be continuing, or next few weeks we'll be continuing on mental health and our thoughts on that, including potentially why it's happening, how do we understand people, what's the best ways to sit with people, what are some key things to talk with people about or avoid talking with people about that struggle with, and how to potentially identify people that have that and to care for them appropriately. So yeah, stick around. Till next time.
He's amazing, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.